I'm ready.
All right, I started to record. Kyle, I'm so excited to have you on my show. I love your vibes.
Oh, thank
I
you.
just,
Thank you.
I just read your ebook or your book,
Yes.
so thank you for doing that one. And there's so much I want to talk about, and I'm gonna try to keep it maybe around under an hour. And but I am so intrigued by your story and also
Mm,
how down to earth you are, and I just love that, and the scientific approach you have to things, and the
mm,
analytic brain, or like how you see things
mm.
analytically, and
Right.
combine that with tuning into energies and connect to the spiritual world as well. So I would love to explore that, but first of all, can you tell the listeners a little bit, first of all, where you are?
Sure. I am physically in the Boston area on the east coast of the USA. And although I did grow up overseas and have been to many, many countries, this is where I have set down roots for over 3 decades.
Wow. And yes, I want to talk about, get into that. And so, first of all, I will put all the links to your YouTube, your website, and all that. But can you just tell the listeners, first of all, where they can find you and what you
Yes,
do?
my main site is crystalconcentrics.com. And what I have done there is created a bit of a hub. It has my Facebook feed, it has my TikTok feed right on the homepage. And if you click on the videos, you can get to the YouTube very easily. I have a blog there, I have a podcast, and I also have a physical brick and mortar shop in my area on one of the main avenues here in town. And so I'm interfacing with the public all the time, but also because I put out 2 TikToks every day, I get a lot of feedback and comments and interaction from the general public of all generations, people who are my age and older, and much, much, much younger also, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and like for people that are into Instagram like me, I'm not really a TikTok person, and I'm just amazed that you
Mm.
have it there as well. But I just love them. They got so much information. They're like, yeah, it's so go there and have a look as well. So what's your handle for
The
Instagram?
handle for everything is
Hmm.
Crystal
Yeah.
Concentrics.
All right.
So
Okay.
you look up Crystal Concentrics, you'll find it on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and the main website, as well as on Facebook.
And also, if people just want to be a little bit uplifted, watch his videos because it's very like good vibes.
Oh, good, good. I'm really glad. So you discovered me before we
No,
contacted you?
no, like
Okay.
yeah, no, like, it was just because we connected now, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I haven't seen you before, and but that's how universe works, like it
It
just brings
is.
people together when it's time. And yeah, so let's talk about your background. In your book, you mentioned a little bit that you kind of been in Moscow, Brazil, and let's start from the beginning. The
Okay.
once upon a
Well,
time.
yeah, once upon a time I was almost born in Africa. But my mother had family in France, so I was born in France, and then we shuttled back and forth to Washington, D.C. while we were doing overseas U.S. embassy posts in Moscow and Bonn, Germany, and Brasilia. And interestingly, my parents went on to do Spain and China.
Wow.
So
So how
they had a
come how come they did that? Like were the travelers, or was it because of work?
no, no, it was work because they were with the U.S. Foreign Service and they were with the Cultural Agency and they were in charge of the U.S. libraries in the different countries and the press corps and dealing with foreign governments on that level, culturally primarily.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting that I grew up with my parents bringing U.S. culture to the world. And then when I was first in retail, I was bringing other cultures to the US through international clothing and jewelry. And then all of a sudden, by chance, I stumbled upon this whole crystal experience where I brought what seems to be essentially a sort of supernatural alien source of information to the planet to be shared with people in a way that seems new and fresh and different from what is out there in terms of existing crystal lore.
Yeah, and that happened about 1987 or something like that. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
But before that, like you were in Brazil, is that when you were little, like when you got interested in crystal? Was that
Well, I was in high school there.
okay?
I did all of high school there, and I got exposed to the crystals because, we visited some jewelers and we visited some mining towns and we bought some crystals, and it was great. In fact, it's funny that you should say that. I'm remembering now that the earth around Brasilia is red. And I believe that in Australia you have that in some places also. And it's a very special quality to the land that when you have red earth.
Yeah, I still haven't gone out there to the desert, like to the out in the outback. Like I want to do that one day as well. I got a urge of going there, and yeah,
That's right. Well,
but
you've been there long enough. It's
yeah, I
time.
know. I know. It's time for me to step up with everything. So is why I just wanted to ask you because you mentioned another. I think I listened to High Journey with you, and I just love that, like that podcast with her. But you were saying it's a crystal capital. Where is it the crystal country or like Brazil? Were you
Well,
in the capital, or
Brazil,
like were you in Brazil or were you in the actual country Brazil? Because there's
I
a
was in the country
yeah,
Brazil
yeah,
in Brasilia, which is the
Brasilia, yeah,
capital.
yeah.
But I was doing a search online earlier today, and I was looking at amethyst production. And I don't know, if it was thousands of tons or whatever it was, but the global production of amethyst was like 5,300, and Brazil was producing 3,800 of that.
Wow.
So that just gives you a little sense of the
Mm.
volume. The thing is that Madagascar is not known for its amethyst, but Madagascar is producing enormous, like comparable amounts of stone to Brazil, just because of whatever the gift of nature to that particular landmass.
Wow. Yeah, I just wanted to check in on that because it really interests me. So let's talk about 1987. What happened?
Oh, you want the
Yes, I
story?
want this story. I want the listeners to hear the story because, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you the
Yeah.
abbreviated
Could you
version.
just,
And
sorry to interrupt, can you just
yeah.
put your camera up a little bit so there's a little bit space
Oh,
above?
sorry.
So
Let's
for
have
you
more space.
listeners, yeah, that's better. Like for you
Ooh.
listeners that are listening on just on the audio, we're doing a video as well that's going to be put up on
Yes.
Kyle's YouTube if he wants to. Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to. I
yeah,
already want to.
yeah,
I was born wanting to.
yeah.
Now, about this story, just so that your listeners know that it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago, and now it's actually kind of coming back to me, that whenever I tell this story, I get goosebumps and feel all funny because it was very, very intense. In summary, I went to a crystal shop, which was owned by someone who has since become a pretty big name, a very big name in the New Age metaphysical crystal business world. And he gave me a moldavite at the time, and I didn't think anything of it until I was leaving his place when I suddenly experienced this extraordinary vortex of energy coming down through me and into my pocket where the stone was. And it felt like it was it was odd because the energy was coming into me and it was also coming up through the ground, but it somehow felt like it was pulling life energy out of me. So it was not a fun experience, and I immediately took it out and I put it on the floor of the car. And that night, when I was having a dream, I was working at my shop. I had been working at a natural food store, and this nondescript woman came up outside and opened her mouth and created this extraordinary sound that I had never heard before. And I looked around to see if anyone had heard it, and nobody else but I heard it. And I opened my mouth and responded in the same language. And it was so extraordinary to just sort of witness myself having this conversation in a language that I had never heard that was conveying real amounts of information. Now, I don't know if I should tell you what the information was or entice the people to get the book in
Oh
order
yeah.
to learn the
I think
details.
they still should go and get the book because it's you got so much information there that's invaluable. Like it's yeah. But if you want to share whatever you want to do, Kyle, it's if you would like
Okay.
to share, maybe teaser a little bit,
Sure, I'll do a
please.
little
Yeah.
teaser.
What?
Um,
Yeah.
basically, um, basically, it was a situation in which I was being given the opportunity to reconnect with the alien race that I had somehow come from, and I refused because I told them that I had spent too much time here and I was not going anywhere. I was too invested in my terrestrial existence. So they tried a few more times to lure me away. And they did not succeed. Obviously, here I am all these years later. But what happened, the strangest thing, I mean, aside from that being an extremely strange experience, and there were some weird follow-up visions that I had too, but the strangest outcome, the most unexpected outcome, was that I suddenly knew all this information about crystals within a week, 2 weeks of that whole experience. And I had no idea why that was, except that the knowledge had come through the moldavite and through that experience of interfacing with that extraterrestrial encounter. Um, and so then from there, I was like, suddenly I knew what to do with people, and I could read people's past lives, and I could do healing work on people. And I also began to buy and sell the stones because if the stones are the currency of the crystal energetic economy, then more stones equals more possible connections, more things that can happen, more possibilities. And so bit by bit, I built up my collection, and then I started buying, selling, and then I did lots of other things career-wise, and I came back to it full time around the time of the Mayan big calendar event of 2012. Now, I don't particularly follow astrology, and I don't particularly read too much into those types of things, but when a coincidence is that obvious, it's hard to ignore. So I'm willing to accept whichever way those things are connected. It happened in 2012 and it happened in 1987. And I turned full time back into the crystals. And and I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself or if you have other questions you want
No,
to
no,
ask.
please go,
I'll
go.
just flow.
It's it's nice to have a coffee with you and just talk about this. I
I
love
know
it.
it's
Yeah.
like we're sitting across
Oh,
from
I
the
love it.
breakfast table.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
See, you're going to be on video. You should absolutely be doing video. You're great at it. Um, so what happened for me was that after all of those years, where I had been more private with my practice, except for the fact that I was working on people, I realized I needed to start teaching this information and sharing it with other people. And I went from a sort of healer stage to more of an educator stage, which is where I'm at now. Where most of my time I spend educating people. And also, of course, I buy and sell because my standards are very high because I know what are the most energetically useful and significant stones. Um, and at that time, what is it? Almost 9 years ago, I started to teach classes, and then I began to systematize, and then that led one step to another to me creating this book because I wanted to capture in one place all of my teachings. So you can know what my teachings are from reading the book. You can't experience them or maybe teach them, but it goes a long way towards my leaving a legacy statement about what it is that I've learned and what it is that I do.
And just when you connected with this being or this lady that had the sound, like, did they ever tell you where they are from?
No, there was no. I mean, the specific quote was, "The mothership is over us. Now would be a good time to join us again." That was the extent of the communication. And my response was, "No, I've been here too long. I'm not going."
Yeah. You got a mission. Too much to do, hey?
Yes, absolutely.
I
Well, I
feel
didn't
the
even
same.
know this aspect of the mission at the time. But what I think is interesting is that um, because we spoke the same language, because I knew exactly what she was referring to, there was an inner knowing about our relationship that I would never have known otherwise until that experience. So in the experience, so I didn't have to be, it didn't have to be spelled out to me. We're from here and you are from there and we can reconnect now. Like I automatically knew that, and I automatically knew that language, which was so freaky because uh, I had no basis for knowing it and I had never heard anything like it before. I've since realized that that is an actual sound that people can make. Um, and it may be some sort of alien tongue from people who know how to use it. And the power of it is so extraordinary, the power of sound, that in one of my visions I saw that it could, destroy, it could disapparate whole buildings, which is pretty strong stuff.
Was it more like a sound than words? Was it more
It
like the
was
vibration
absolutely
of
not
it?
words. It was not words. It was for those who are familiar with it or who will go out and research it. It was what is called harmonic singing or toning. So it was like two or three tones simultaneously going. So it was a sound, and the sound conveyed words and meaning.
And it was more like telepathically as well, like more like the
Well, I
connection.
heard
That,
it.
yeah, heard it,
Well,
but yeah,
I
like
heard
you
it,
connected.
but nobody else had to hear it in order for me to understand what it was, which
Yeah.
is the telepathic thing, because it was through a glass window, and nobody else could hear it. So in a sense, it was hyper focused and hyper directed, so that only you could. It's like as if you and I were having an entire conversation, and your audience was unable to hear a single word that we said. But here we were nodding our heads and conveying information. That's what it was like, which is pretty bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool because yeah, like I've had a little bit of light language, that kind of connections as well. So, and I have friends that do that, and I find it's quite fascinating because you have to use another sense, and like you have to, everything you have learned in your Earth life, you just have to throw it out and start over again when you do the connection. You just have to be like a child, and like okay,
I
let's start again. And yeah, I just find it very
There's one
beautiful.
thing I want to interject, because we've been talking about Australia and you're in Australia. And I have to tell you that years later, after this experience, I saw a movie that was very powerful for me, in terms of evoking this type of experience. And you may have heard of it. It's called The Last Wave.
Yes. Yeah.
It was recorded there in Australia. Very important movie to me. I really think that there's something there that people who are interested in this type of stuff need to experience.
Very, yeah. So, what else would you like to talk about? Have you? Can
Um,
I just ask you before we go into? I want to talk a little bit about the book and understanding how to work with the stones and all the terms and all that as well. But have you had any more encounters after that?
no, it was all within about 3 weeks of each other.
And the
And
moldavite that you were gifted, that was
yes,
from what's his name again?
Robert
Yeah.
Simmons and he gave that to me, and I ended up giving or selling it to someone else who really wanted it. And it was interesting because she was not well. She had something that was trying to take her away physically. She was ill, and I think that she was drawn to it for her own purposes in order to make her next steps. So I didn't, because I had already, like after that happened, I wasn't touching moldavite for 20 years. So I certainly didn't need it, and I was happy to pass it along to someone who did want it and who did feel like they could use it. But that doesn't mean that the energy or the voice or the message or the mission particular stone with me was going to be the exact same thing for anybody else.
And yeah, because I want to ask you about, I got so many questions. So, Kyle, um, I want to ask you about people that hold on to, first of all, the terms, like how you describe crystals, stones, rocks. Can you just tell people which is which, please?
Right, surely. Yeah, I got that question actually on TikTok recently, and I'm going to be making a response video about it. So you said crystals, stones, rocks. So rocks to me are basically what you'll find in a stream or on a hike or in a driveway. They're not descript particularly. Now all of the rocks are stones, and all of the crystals are also stones. But the thing that makes crystals unique is that they have a particular formation, a termination that makes them a crystal. For example, this lovely piece here. This is a great big New Hampshire smoky quartz, and it's taken this shape. Now, does that mean
Can you hold it
that...
closer to you because it kind of blurs it out for everyone? Yeah,
Oh,
there you go. Oh, if
sorry.
you have it in front
That's
of you, for
in front of me right
yeah,
there.
for anyone
Thank
watching the video, yeah, yeah.
you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Um, that's great. So this is a wonderful piece. Actually, this is the better side to show. Um, but the point I'm trying to make is that we use the term crystal loosely, and we use it to refer to everything, but we use crystals to refer to the stones that have that little extra umph that we like in the metaphysical world. And for many years, and this is one of the things that I talk about in the book, for many years I had a sort of snobby prejudice against rocks and stones that you would just find. And I finally realized that I did have a place for them in my 10 energy zone system, and that place was in foundation, the foundation energy zone. And I call all of that stuff bedrock, which is basically the continents, the foundation of the whole planet. And that is a very important function to it. But I want to make a distinction also that a crystal is a beautifully formed stone that, comes to a point in the traditional ways that they do. But we also call something like this. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
This is a lapis. And the lapis, even though it never forms into a crystal proper, we can call it a crystal also because it has a very specific structure. It contains calcite and pyrite and lazurite, and together they make up what is called lapis. And as such, you can call it a microcrystalline crystal, whereas this is a macrocrystalline crystal. So this is it's so big that you can see it. But the things that make lapis lapis are very small, but together they make the lapis stand out as being different from a piece of granite or whatever else it might be.
So
Does that kind of answer?
yes, thank you so much. And in terms of if we talk about sizes and because like I have a friend and she's got a very small crystal and she said, "Oh my God, this one has got so much energy and power compared with the bigger one she has, and that's the same crystal, like a same crystal
Same type.
family, yeah,
Yeah.
same type."
Yeah.
So what is it with that?
Well, it's kind of like what happened with the moldavite for me. It was a relatively smallish piece, tip of your finger, but it did everything it needed to do. And a larger piece may or may not do it, but also small pieces may or may not do it. I don't tend to get too excited about a tumbled piece of lapis when I can have a piece like this, because I like to hold them, and I believe that the increased contact of your skin with the stone enhances your capacity to connect with whatever it is that's going on with it. That doesn't mean that a small stone can't pack a punch, but it means that this has more of what makes a lapis than a small piece of lapis. And the same is true with a piece of, let me see if I have it here. Gosh. Oh, I super don't have it here. But I am wearing a substantial moldavite here.
Oh, that one
This
is
circle here.
beautiful. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
And this one is special because it has a triangle on the back and it's indented. It's quite magnificent. So in more recent years, once I got over my fear of moldavite, which happened because I was buying and selling more and there was so much interest in it, I had to get it and have it around, and then I got used to it and I realized it wasn't going to be a problem for me. And on the big pieces, what I like is that there's like a whole, think of it this way. Think of it this way. You may have seen someone who has a very deluxe doghouse. They've built it has wonderful little carvings and all this type of stuff. And then you think of a cathedral. And the cathedral is just a larger version of the structure with a lot more nooks and crannies, a lot more detail to it that went into it. And so a bigger moldavite has that surface area and the internal area that make it more of an experience for me. So does that sort of
Yes,
answer?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've also, in terms of one more important thing before we go on, is I would like to ask you, because you have another take on clearing or cleaning crystals and how you handle them when you get them, because you always hear like, oh, put them in salt water or put them under the moonlight or in the sun or do this and this and this. What's your take?
Yes, that's one of the main themes in my book, is the ways in which I have differed. And it's not like, well, when I first started, I didn't really know better. I had information and I heard all the things about cleansing and clearing. And I had a very bad experience, which I share in the book, which is that I had cleared and cleansed a piece of emerald, a little cluster of emerald that was lovely and wonderful. And I still remember the energy of that stone before I cleared and cleansed it. And as soon as I cleared and cleansed it, the energy went away. It just hid. It disappeared. And I learned from that lesson never to do that again, because I believe that the stones come to us with intrinsic energies and messages and functions that we interfere with when we attempt to mess with them, because of what I call the sponge theory, which is that crystals are merely sponges and that all they do is sit around absorbing negative energy. And I think that is absolutely not what they do. They have their own energy signature, and if you allow them to do what they do best and you don't interfere with it, that you're able to get more and better energy out of them.
I see them as a kind of condensed energy, and
They
yeah,
are.
I talk to them too. It might sound
Yes.
silly, but I do talk to them like, "Hello, I love you," and like because I feel they have a certain vibration, and also the misconception that I think we have, which I read in the book as well, is that we are there to reset them, and that's not.
Mm.
Yeah. So can you share the take? Oh yeah, your view of
Yes.
that.
Well, there's two things I want to touch on based on what you said. One is our penchant or tendency to anthropomorphize them, which is not something that I do, but many people do, including you. So it's okay to love your crystals and to talk to them and to be with them in a way that feels personal and connected and meaningful for you. Um, I personally tend to think of them much more impersonally, such that they don't really have names or genders or identities in the ways that we tend to. Um, but what they do have is the thing that you said at the beginning, which is a specific energy signature, a little bundle of this is what I do, and this is what I do better than any other stone in the universe. And so I what I call my capacity to recognize those energy signatures is called being geosentient. So
Yes, that was my next
geosent
question. Yes, please. Yeah.
okay. Great. Yeah, geosentience um and I came up with a brand new word that you're going to hear on this show for the first time, which is fun. Um but geosentience is the capacity to sense those energies in the stones. And this new word, which actually I think I may have mentioned in a TikTok, is geoempathic. So geoempathic is a little different from geosentience. So geosentience means I am aware of what's going on and I can feel that energy. But geoempathic may be a more of a transfer of energy one way or the other, where my energy is going into the stone or the stone's energy is going into me and taking over, and it's a more involved experience, which people say to me, "Oh, how can you be around all those crystals? Isn't it overwhelming and too much energy?" And I just tell them it's like being around wild animals in a wildlife reserve. You get used to them. There, okay, so there's the lion and there's the rhinoceros or whatever it is that's there. And you're no longer like, oh my God, that's an ostrich or whatever it is. You get used to it. And that's what happens for me.
Oh, that is a good take on it. So to go into the 10 energy zones, could you talk through a little bit about that? Not
Very important.
yeah, very
Very.
important. Like yeah,
So the
please.
10 energy zones are significant for two reasons. One, all stones can be categorized as one of these 10, which makes it very handy and logical. Like you said at the beginning of the show, it's a very methodical way of thinking about it, and it makes it much easier, I think, to think of all the stones in one of these 10 energy zones than having an amorphous, endless list of whatever it is that people have when they talk about the stones. What makes it relevant in a second way is that these 10 energy zones speak to various, I won't say all aspects, but they speak to various key aspects of the human experience. So, foundation, for example, speaks to generations, ancestors, your past, your own younger life. All of those things are reside in the foundation energy zone, and there are stones that resonate with that whole experience. And we could go through all 10 of them, but you're maybe familiar from the chakra system with the heart, or in the chakra system they call this the throat. I call it voice. And so what I do with my 10 energy zone system is I take it away from a necessarily physical location on the body, and instead I talk about the concept of what is it really. So throat is a place on your body, but voice is a concept that's much bigger than that. Voice has to do with how we take abstract notions, concepts, images, visions, and then we formulate them into words so that we can express them in the outside world. So that's just a little glimpse into what foundation and voice are all about. But there's heart, there's
And
self.
higher
This
self.
this one is a big one.
Yeah.
So it's called crown in the chakra system. Crown, again, is a sort of physical concept because a crown doesn't necessarily float. It sits right on your head. Whereas my name for that energy zone is source. And source is much, much bigger than crown because it's the interface between the individual and the ascended and the eternal from this vantage point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whereas foundation, in fact, I'm gonna actually grab the book. You haven't seen this. This is a proof of the book,
Ooh.
and it's got all
Yes.
the pages. So
Yes.
that's super exciting. And the thing I want to show you here
You
on
have
the
to
show,
hold
and
it in front of your face because
I
all the
will,
other sides are, yeah. Yeah.
yes, you're going to tell me exactly where to hold it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's got,
what I am trying to find, and I'm sorry for the people who are doing this audio, but you will then have an incentive to get the book and see what it looks like
yeah,
visually.
it's well
If I
worth
don't,
it. Even like the ebook, it's got all the details about everything, and through the chapters as well. You got like all the crystals, rocks, or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, just there as
I'm
well.
not finding the page I'm looking
Oh,
for,
okay, yeah,
but
but
it
it's
has a
really good.
diagram. It
Yes,
has a
yeah.
diagram. It's the only diagram in the entire book. Everything else is a photo of the crystals, and they're all big, beautiful crystal photos and wonderful specimens from my collection or from my selection that I sell from too. So it's kind of fun to show people, hey, this book, this crystal is inside of my book, and I'll show you this other thing. Can you see this okay?
Oh, if you push it back a little bit, yeah. Oh,
Closer.
oh, you got
There we
cards as well. Have you? Is it
So
like
I have
oracle
cards
cards?
as well. It's called my Crystal Meditation and Affirmation
Oh,
card deck.
nice. Do you sell them on your website? Yeah, for
I do
people. Yeah,
sell it on the
excellent.
website, and I have 80
Beautiful.
stones represented in here. And in the book, I have 177 photos and 250 odd actual crystals that I talk about. So
Wow.
it's a
That's awesome. Yeah. On the, I just have a question which is kind of related to the zones and the chakras. But when you talk about the higher self, do you know anything about that? Because in the Egyptian time, they have a similar. They call it the Ka. Do you know anything about
oh,
that?
I don't know about the
No.
ka.
Yeah. Yeah. I have
Although
to.
I did spend a past life in Egypt.
Oh, cool. What were you
So at that
doing?
point, you
What did
really
you do?
want to know?
Yes, please. Tell
Well,
me.
I was the chief embalmer
Nice.
of the pharaohs or whoever was in charge at the time.
Yeah.
And I met my end during a revolt in which the people who killed me were running up a pyramid that I was at the top of. And that was the last memory I have.
Wow. Was
That's
that
pretty
did
wild.
you have like was it kind of a memory flash, or was it more like a regression or meditation, or how do you get?
It was a memory flash.
Wow.
It was a clear vision. I'm here. This is what I do, who I am, and this is the way I'm dying.
How did you look like? Do you Did you see yourself?
I was looking out of my eyes, so
Yeah.
I didn't. There
Yeah.
was no Skype or Zoom.
Oh, how cool. How
Although
cool.
they had the mirrors, they did have the mirrors there.
Oh, they did?
But I didn't get enough of. Oh yeah, the Egyptians were invented the mirrors. That that's the. I mean, it was burnished metal or glass or something like that, but they did it. Um, and interestingly, this is a little tidbit from my travels. At Machu Picchu, they have a beautiful sort of indented reflecting pool that was meant to reflect the sky so that they could see the stars in the water and
Wow.
do their astrology.
Wow. When did you
Pretty.
go there? Was that when you
I
went to Brazil around that same time or?
No, it was much later. It was more recently. I want to say it was 2013 or 2011.
How was that
2011.
experience?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was great. Peru was amazing. Um, and we went to some very special places, including completely secluded temples in the mountains.
Ooh, tell me.
Um, yeah. Oh well, there was this one. There was we had a tour guide for the whole trip, but this one day we had to go with a different tour guide because he was kind of a shaman leader of his small population group. And so he took us to this secret temple that they had that only he had access to show. And so we climbed up. It wasn't a big mountain. It was a sort of a hill. And you went up, and the stones were like this in a great big pyramid, open pyramid shape. So they had this sort of platform with the pyramid overlook, and then they had an altar. And the altar there was of very finely polished granite, as I recall. It was a red granite. Um, and then to the sides, they had dug in squares, rectangles into the stone. And in those little open cabinets, as it were placed mummies of ancestors and other people. So they would be doing their rituals in view of these mummies, which is pretty wild stuff.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. I bet you have a lot of other stories as well. But yeah, I want to go over and in terms of the quiz, so like I'm gonna try to wrap it up a little bit, and maybe I can have you on the show later on, another in the near future. That would be
Absolutely.
lovely because I've got more questions.
I know
So
you'll think of other things after you watch it also, and
yeah,
your audience may have questions, which I love
yes,
to
for
answer.
sure. So in terms of it's more for my audience, for people that might be a little bit of a beginner and would like to have the top five
Mm,
crystals. The common question, but I think it's very important question to ask. And if you want something for protection, for
mm.
prosperity, for love, or just something, would you recommend? Because in your videos and when you talk, you say like if that's my interpretation, correct me if I'm wrong, that they should decide and feel the energy, or should you have someone else recommend a stone or gem?
Oh, you're
Yeah.
saying should the individual figure it
Yes.
out or should they follow
Yeah.
recommendations?
Well, what do you think
Um,
about that? Because sometimes you go into crystal shops and people, oh yeah, this one is good for you. While I think
right,
this is my personal point of view, I just feel. And
right.
yeah, what do you think? What should you do?
Um, I find, well, in observing people's buying habits, I have found that while there are many people who are driven and directed by the books that they read, and the books tell them that they need this, so they come in and they say, I have to have this, and only this will do because my book told me so. So that is a mentality that exists. I think I prefer your approach more, which is to be driven by your intuition as to what you're attracted to. And ultimately, I find that when people purchase things, they're purchasing mostly on their personal attraction to the stone. Now, That being said, I always get the question about what are the top 5 beginner stones that I recommend. And I take 2 different approaches. One is to say, well, as a beginner, you should get a few stones that have radically different tactile energies so that you can sense the distinctions and teach yourself how to identify them so that later you can build on that and get other stones. Because now, if you understood the difference between, say, a very light amber and a very dense hematite, then that shows you a real polarity, and that helps you to then add and see other subtle differences between the stones. Alternatively, you can say, okay, well, instead of taking an energetic approach, why don't I just pick the top 5 easiest ones that are most accessible? Because often when people are starting, they don't come in and say, okay, I want the most expensive and the most extraordinary stone. Although that's true with moldavite, people will be like, I want to go to the stars, give me the best. Um, and that's great, but I find if I had to do a top 5, I suppose black tourmaline would be a good one on the basis of protection or boundaries and limits and stuff like that. Rose quartz would have to be one because it has to do with unconditional love. You mentioned 2 things, prosperity and relationship, which I think are a little more complex and sophisticated for me to say, okay, this one stone. And I have a whole thing in the book about that,
Yes.
both of those. So, and videos about that too. But so there we are. We have our black tourmaline, we have our rose quartz. I think smoky quartz is an absolute must, and people don't know it as well. Clear quartz is another absolute must, and probably amethyst or hematite. But those are like all really easy, obvious, accessible stones that you can learn about and buy and experience cheaply as a way of getting into it as a start. And then, just like in the tactile method that I gave as option 1, in this other one, as you get used to the concepts and energies of these 5, then you expand and build out to get other things.
What is your view of people putting them in the water?
I don't care about it at all.
Because some of them are actually dangerous if they get absorbed in the water.
Right. You're right. There are some things that are toxic, and there are also things that can be damaged by the salt water, and I never recommend using salt at all, um, or putting things in the water in general, but putting things in a running stream is a little bit like putting it in the moonlight or putting it in the ground. These are techniques by which people use nature as a way of kind of re-energizing or conditioning the stones so that they can do what they do even better than they did before. I don't generally do any of those things myself because this thing has been doing the same thing for 30 years. I don't have to worry about it losing any of its oomph. But part of the reason I don't have to worry about it is that I don't put it around really negative people. I don't try to change it in any way. I just let it be.
And what I also I kind of meant as well, people putting it in drinking water.
Oh, yes, the elixirs. I did a
Yeah,
video about that recently.
yes, and that I think
So
you had a good point in the book about that as well. So,
And I do another video about that where I just figure I like to eat food. I don't like to eat rocks. So I don't tend to want to drink the elixirs or mess with that at all when I can just, if I want these 2 stones energies, why don't I just pick them up? And I just find that's a much more direct way of experiencing them rather than trying to soak water and then ingest and then see what happens from there.
so I
It's
was,
just
yeah,
not a
yeah,
priority.
because you mentioned like especially selenite that kind of disappear.
Selenite can melt, and it's not something you should breathe at all, so it probably isn't something you want to have in your drinking water either.
Yeah. So, so Kyle, How do you ground yourself? Like, yeah. So
Um,
what do you do to ground yourself and keep yourself balanced? Because with everything that's going on in the world, and
right. I use grounding stones, and the top three grounding stones that come to my mind immediately that I think are wonderful are hematite is one, because it's mostly iron, and then also I like the iron meteorites. The iron meteorites are better than hematite in a way because their capacity for grounding incorporates a trajectory from space to Earth that was stopped by the Earth's surface, or it would have gone straight to the core. So there's this linear connectivity between the underworld and the overworld that exists with those meteors. And then the third one, which is the stone's stone, is ruby. I love ruby as the ultimate grounding stone. So
no.
that's how I do it.
And for you, what does your future look like?
What is my future like? Well, if I had a crystal ball, oops, I have many crystal balls. No, I will say my goal is to put this book out there and to impact as many people as possible with this perspective, so that they know that there's an alternative. Because one of the great things, the surprises of some of my hugely viral videos, some of which talk about my ideas against cleansing, clearing, and programming, is that there are many people who said, "Oh, that always made sense, but I didn't know that it was okay to feel that way." And I felt that I was doing it wrong because other people were telling me I had to do this, this, and this, and I'm doing that, that, and that. So for me, it has a double purpose. One is to get the word out about what my inspiration was. And then second is to resonate with other people and give them a belief system that they can sink their teeth into and understand the logic of, and therefore get even more out of the stones than they would otherwise.
Nice. So, where can people find you again?
Okay, people
Tell
can find
people.
me. Yeah, it's all about the brand Crystal Concentrics. Um, I'm going to have my book on sale there, and I'm going to have I have all the videos. I have my YouTube is Crystal Concentrics, website crystalconcentrics.com, Instagram, TikTok, and even Facebook. So on all of those different social media, some people, like you said, you're more of an Instagram person, will gravitate towards one more than the other. But wherever you go, you will be able to find me, and you will be able to ask me questions like on TikTok. TikTok is particularly good because people will ask me a question and I can make a reply video specifically addressing that question.
That's great.
So that's where
Yeah.
you find me, and that's how we can interact. Hop on my mailing list and get the book when it comes out.
Yeah. Oh, great. And I'll put everything on the show note page on all the podcast app, Ascension Talk with Jenny, and also on my blog on ascensiontalk.com as well. And you will be blog number, let's see, 11, 12, I think. Be so
Hey, there
11 or
you go.
12, yeah. So you actually inspire me to open a YouTube channel now, so I'm going to do that. But I send
You
this video.
absolutely
I send
should.
this video as well, so you can put it up on your YouTube. So thank
Okay,
you
great.
so much for sharing with me your story and all your expertise. But I hope to have you on in the near future. That would be wonderful.
Surely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you'll come up with more questions, and I'll look forward to that. And I am most grateful that you said yes. Let's do this interview. It's been a good time, and it's like we had this a nice coffee, tea in the morning, and we included all of your audience, which you love and I love, and they're what make this all worth it because their ears and their thoughts and their feelings about all this stuff are so valuable and important to consider.